right, we're back. Welcome to Screencast number 2. Let's continue talking about imagined interaction theory. Okay, so this is where we really sort of hit the ground a little bit more now. Okay, imagined interactions possess many of the same characteristics as real conversations. I know that might sound weird, but it's true. When you really think about it, the imagined interaction, when it's an imagined interaction, okay, that's what we're talking about here. When it's an imagined interaction, it's going to be a lot like a real conversation. Fragmentary, extended, rambling, repetitive, coherent. I mean, we could continue to list things there, okay? We mentioned emotional affect earlier. Well, emotions may feel anger emotions. Wow. It is actually 6:15 in the morning on Monday, okay? So I'm still a little sleepy after losing the hour of sleep. Individuals may feel anger as they relive old conflicts in their minds, or you might feel happy while imagining a positive encounter. Some of those really good encounters that we have, we can remember and feel good about. So now this is where something gets about this theory for us to really I'm not even making sense. This next point is important in regard to imagined interactions. Our expectancies for interpersonal communication encounters emanate from imagined interactions. Okay, let me start with the first part of that. So if you've taken my interpersonal class, I talk a lot about what an expectation is. An expectation is something that you hold. An expectation is something where, very powerful. I hold my expectation, and then it is either going to get met, exceeded, or not met. And depending on what type of expectation, depending on the relationship, depending on the context, depends on the response to all those things. So many times, our expectancies for interpersonal communication. So whenever we have some sort of expectation for an interpersonal encounter, that emanates from the imagined interactions that we have prior to that. And in fact, it can be a retroactive one, a retroactive imagined interaction, a proactive imagined interaction. So many times, the expectations we have in our one-on-one conversations or interactions in everyday life, sometimes those expectations that are there come from our imagined interactions in the past. Those emanate from imagined interactions through replaying images from the electronic media. So I don't know about you, but my expectations for my first romantic encounter, whenever I was the first time you're trying to sort of, you like someone, but you don't really know what to do whenever you're younger and you're trying to figure it out. My expectations for what that was going to be like, feel like, sound like, and how it was going to go purely came from my experiences through replaying images in electronic media. I had not ever done it before. I had seen some people in real life do it, but to kind of say the first hello, how are you doing type of thing, I just had never seen that. So they also emanate through conversations with partners, siblings, peers. It can even happen through novels. Depending on what your life experience is, depending on what has happened in your world, can depend on what is actually feeding your expectations for interpersonal communication. So if you have taken my interpersonal class, we also talk about implicit personal theories of communication. And so your implicit personal theories are going to come into play here in regard to what level of expectation you have coming out of those imagined interactions, okay? Imagined interactions can help form expectations or relational schemata for how individuals will perform in a variety of roles. That's just a way of saying it much clearer than I am right now. I kind of truthfully feel like I'm sort of rambling, but I'm going to stick with it because I'm already 5 minutes into the screencast. So here we go. Hang in there, all right? I'll get my head on better as we go through here. So imagined interactions are a means of problem solving by allowing an individual to think through a problem. And here's the thing, it allows you to think through a problem in a very unique way. It's one thing for me to sit down and think through a problem and go, well, I'm not sure what I should do, and I'm like trying to figure it out. But what an imagined interaction does is it allows me to think through a problem via the interaction. I can run scenarios. One of the things that oftentimes we will do as people is we will run best case scenario. We'll run worst case scenario. That way, if it That way, hopefully, everything that we experience goes somewhere in between those two ends. And then you sort of take what you know of the context and you say, okay, worst case scenario, they do this. Best case scenario, they do this. Here are the things I know it's likely to go this way. Let me think this through. And then you run through the interaction in your head, and it really helps you think through that problem. As a result of this type of approach, imagined interactions, they've been used in therapy, because it allows the folks to visualize interaction with others who were not emotionally or physically available to them. Now, I am not a counselor, but I know I know a little bit about this. Imagined interactions can be used with someone who just refuses to come to therapy. This gets used in family and relationship therapy, where perhaps a marriage is degrading, and one of the partners refuses to come in for therapy. They will have a blank chair sometimes, and they will have the person interact with that person without them there. This also happens in people sometimes that, no, I'm not talking about like seance type thing, but if someone has passed away, perhaps a parent has passed away, and that parent caused significant trauma in the person's life, they'll have that child, usually an adult at the time, talk to that person although they're not there. And it actually helps. It helps people overcome some of the obstacles that they're dealing with. Sometimes it just helps people come to terms with what they're feeling, which is also powerful. So imagined interactions are very useful. They help people in planning messages and enhancing communication effectiveness. So what Honeycutt is getting at here with imagined interaction theory is that the interactions we imagine play a larger role in our everyday existence than we would probably give them credit for. Honeycutt is one of the scholars who was publishing intrapersonal communication scholarship in the late 70s, all through the 80s. Honeycutt is someone who really advocated for intrapersonal communication to sort of become its own co-discipline in the discipline of communication. So Honeycutt's been around doing this stuff, and he's arguing that our imagined interactions are very powerful. So I don't want to kick that horse too much. So let's move on to the functions. Okay, so we've talked about what exactly an imagined interaction is. We've talked about now sort of the general view of imagined interaction theory. Now we hit the 6 functions of imagined interactions. We mentioned these earlier. I am just going to throw them up here really quick, and for some reason I had those out of order. Sorry about that. And these are completely out of order. Sorry. So maintaining relationships, rehearsing messages, aiding people in self-understanding, emotional catharsis, compensation, and managing conflict. I'm not going to explain these right now because I'm about to explain them in gory, disgusting detail as we move forward. So let's talk about these functions one by one. So first of all, we use these imagined interactions to maintain relationships. So this is our interpersonal relationships. You have probably had imagined interactions surrounding most of the relationships in your life that are interpersonal, okay? You've definitely had them with your significant other. You've definitely had them with your family. You've probably had them with your boss or a coworker, possibly a professor, possibly that person you think is potential dating material or whatever. And so what Honeycutt calls this is, he says that they serve to maintain relationships as intrusive thinking, which I think is sort of a cool concept, intrusive thinking. It's intrusive thinking because you're thinking about this interaction. You're having this interaction when the partner is thought about outside their physical presence. And so it's kind of a cool way to think about it. So it helps us maintain our relationships. This goes back to communication being about maintaining reality. You communicate with yourself. You have imagined interactions with the people that you need to have imagined interactions with to help maintain relationship and maintain reality. We also use imagined interactions to rehearse and plan messages. This, to me, is one of the easiest, most clear uses of an imagined interaction, right? When you are going to that job interview, when you're thinking of, making the next step in a romantic relationship, when you're thinking of ending a romantic relationship, stuff like that. So this is some interesting things. So Honeycutt didn't just think of this theory. Honeycutt actually did some data gathering and put this together. So he says that individuals report how they prepare for important encounters and even think of various messages depending on the response of the interaction partner. So that makes sense, right? He didn't just make this up. It's actually in looking at what people do and asking them about their thinking. This is what happens. Thirdly, self-understanding. It allows us to clarify our thoughts, promote our understanding of our own views, helps clarify our feelings on things. So that is so self-understanding is a big part of it. Catharsis. Sometimes it allows us to release our feelings. We can feel joy if we want to relive something that was really cool. Sometimes it allows us to vent our frustration in a healthy way. Sometimes it's not conducive to release your frustration at your boss interpersonally, and so for you to be able to keep your head in the game during the workday, you might have to do that intrapersonally as you head out to lunch to kind of work through that, right? And so it allows us to vent those things. Fifth function, compensation. Sometimes it allows us to compensate when there's a lack of actual conversation. And so this could be, again, someone, we're going to use the example of long distance relationships. Sometimes you're just busy at work, or your partner is out of town on a trip and you only get to talk to them for 2 hours a day when usually you get to talk longer or whatever. Compensation helps with that. The final one is conflict management. This is where we relive old arguments, is one part of it, okay, while simultaneously imagining statements for ensuing encounters. And so the cool thing about when you talk about conflict management with imagined interaction theory is that any retroactive imagined interaction where I'm reliving the conflict from this morning, you know, la 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 la, what I'm doing is I'm reliving that interaction, and it's helping me generate what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say in my future encounter. Okay, so so conflict management is a part of this. I thought this was interesting. Honeycutt interviewed a famous actor from the original Star Trek, okay, who still recalls old arguments from her ex-husband that occurred over 30 years ago because the arguments were memorable and affected her self-concept. And what this person reported was still having the argument in her head from 30 years ago because of some of the things that were said. Notice it's ex-husband at this time. Whatever was said in that, they don't say what was said, but what was said affected her self-concept. And so it was probably a very negative encounter. And so 30 years on, she's still sort of stuck in these conflicts. And so this can happen to us. And probably this is probably more common than we would realize as well. Many of us probably still have, maybe not every day, but many of us probably still find ourselves, if we're honest, having an imagined interaction with someone from our past. And sometimes we relive different outcomes. Sometimes we say the thing that we really freaking wish we had said way back when. So this is just a really interesting example of how imagined interaction deals with conflict management, okay? And then individuals may be more likely to recall arguments rather than positive encounters because of the negativity bias. So very quickly, the negativity bias says just that negative impressions are remembered more than positive ones. This is why it's hard to overcome a negative first impression in a job interview. So that's why they say be prepared to make a good impression. You can overcome it. It just takes time and effort. Okay? So, for example, if I were to give you 3 compliments and 1 criticism, the criticism is more likely to be reflected and recalled because it may provide more information that challenges your self-concept. And isn't that true? If I were to say 3 good things and 1 negative, we would have to, that's probably what we remember. I know I would. So I'm almost out of time for this screencast. I'll see you in screencast number 3.